just as some background of what's going on here, I don't know if we did start with the fiber install for our backbone, so that started last week. As of last Friday, I haven't gotten the numbers for today. As of last Friday, we actually had 6 miles run. So that was in about a week. So I'm hopeful that they got another 6 miles this week, and we're happily chugging along. So they started running all their prep work and everything, and then I think a day or two later they started pulling all the fiber, and then they're just keeping ahead. So they're going to get all the backbone done, and then stop branching out into the buildings. We already did the walkthrough with their engineer to look at all the sites, including the towers. So they're formulating their plan on how they're going to do that. So that's good news. I also talked to them about, if you recall, we did get that CCC grant. So I asked them about if they had fiber on hand to do those 2 northern loops, and they thought they did. So waiting to hear back confirmation that they do that, and to see if they can, right at the end of running all the backbone, just continuing on and doing those loops there. So definitely making progress. I'm glad we're moving forward here.
Good. It's excellent.
Just to highlight that, Devin, those 2 loops are in the most densely inhabited part of the town. And it's the areas up, I don't know whether you've got a clear picture of them. I think Keith has probably sent it to you, but they're up along, basically the Route 6 corridor, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's not only will that give us fiber optic in that most densely settled area, but we're also working towards developing sewer and water services down the Route 6 corridor, starting in the northwest part of it first, and then hopefully going all the way over to the Dartmouth line. And so that area is going to be the area of the most important development, and a mix of residential and commercial probably, and offices of various types. So it's a really great area into which to be bringing that loop, and I think we can have many customers up in that area.
It's fabulous.
And the one other thing that I'm also, I started looking at, I probably should have started this sooner, but I spoke with an internet provider, and right now our internet runs into the police substation on Route 6. So that building is not owned by the town. So I'm looking to move that to the North End Fire Station, which is obviously owned by the town, just so that way we have better control over that demarc there. So I'm looking to migrate that over, and then with the fiber, I'll just extend that demarc from the fire station, back over to the police station there on a pair of fibers. So I think that'll be good as well, just so that we have much more positive control over that. So.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Good. Well, you're making good progress. That's really great to hear.
And it's all behind the scenes.
Yeah, it is.
Well, one was town meeting, but the other was this crazy grant you alerted us to, and we applied for it in 2 days, and we got it in 2 months.
Yeah, that's good.
I think there's more of that stuff hanging out there. I just hope we can tap into it. And that has a lot of implications for the financial situation that we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good.
So I know that we had the agenda, so I don't know if Jeff or Devin, if you're going to jump into that. So.
Yeah, let's start with Devin. Devin, why don't you review the stuff that's sort of under your domain?
Yeah, so first let's talk about network design.
Devin, your sound is faint.
Little
Okay, hang on.
muffled there. Yeah.
Yeah, upgrade your quality, Devin. I mean, Jeff.
Hold on just one minute.
That's probably better.
That is better.
Yes.
For some reason,
Google Meets does not retain my settings, and it defaults to the small, tiny microphone on my laptop as opposed to the external microphone that I use for all other platforms. Anyway,
Okay.
so I'm
All
glad you got that to my attention. All right, so let's talk about network design first. We did get the shape files from Comtrax, handed them over to Biari so that they could, obviously integrate that as part of the overall town network design that they're doing. I got an email yesterday, in fact, from our kind of account manager, if you will, at Biari, saying that they had started the design, but they ran into a conflict. And here's where the conflict is. So as you recall, we talked about trying to get some GIS. Hey, Renee.
Hey, sorry about that.
That's okay. We talked about getting some GIS, trying to get some GIS shape files from the town, specifically as it relates to the parcel data and the overall boundaries. And we were not able to get that. We weren't successful in getting that. So what I told Biari to do is I told Biari to use their standard database of information to pull from, because they've got kind of a national database that they have access to.
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
Sure.
If you go to the town website, we have down on the main page of the town website, they have GIS maps that has all of the assessor's data of all of the properties in the town, easily accessible, and it doesn't analyze it for you, but at least gives you a picture of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Devin, so there is a GIS database. It lets you select like one property at a time, and it gives you all the GIS information. But I know you want that entire shape file, so you want all of the properties all at the same time and not the individual ones. So that's the
Right.
problem I had. So clearly that data exists in some sort of file, but I haven't been able to get a hold of that. The most I've been able to get is what I had sent you was the basically Excel spreadsheet that had all of the the information about the lots and all of that stuff in there.
Right. So here's what we did. So without being able to get access to the town-wide data, I just told Biari to go ahead and use their standard data set, which they did, and they loaded in the parcel information for Westport, and they got a return value of approximately just approximately 10,000 addresses or parcels, which is significantly more, twice as much as we were anticipating at 4,800.
Mhm.
So there's a discrepancy between the data set they're using and what the information we got, pertaining the number of, parcels in the town. So I told them we were going to have this meeting, bring this up. Their concern is obviously we've priced it for 4,800, but yet their database shows 10,000. So Keith, I'm going to let you help me kind of walk through this and figure it out with them. But
there's a lot of protected land, that land that's in trust and everything in town. Whole
Mhm.
sections of town are protected, so there may be a lot of parcels associated with that, but it's not buildable, it's not usable in some way. It's
Okay.
all protected. So my first instinct is to say, that's where the discrepancy is. But yeah, I get you.
well, and so what we might have to provide them is a boundaries that excludes all of that, right? Even though technically it's inside of your city, boundary, it's not really part of the design boundary, basically. So maybe that's the solution. So I'm not sure exactly how to approach it, Keith. If you want to think about that, then you and I can take this offline and try to figure it out. So
Yeah. Okay.
Let me just suggest a couple of points. One, they do have a really good count of the number of residences and the number of businesses.
Mhm.
And I think that should be the kind of control item for what you count. And in addition to what Keith mentioned, a number of people own 3 or 4 pieces of property. They live on one and have a house on one, but they have other adjacent pieces that they've acquired. But I think the control should be the number of residences, and I think we can get those for different parts of town from the assessors, the number of residences and the number of business properties. And we can also probably get a listing of values if we want, a printout of or an Excel sheet of listing all of the businesses and all of the residential properties.
Yeah, David, the assessors did give me an Excel spreadsheet of all of that. So I have that. I did share that with Devin. So we'll go back and look at those
Okay.
numbers there. And
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, David. Obviously, the BRE database would not distinguish whether or not if somebody owns two parcels next to each other. One they use for their yard and the other they use for their home. The BRE data would not distinguish that. It would want to, essentially design to both properties, right? Or both parcels. So we'll probably have to figure out how to get around that. I probably need to set up a call, and Keith, I can do this with you. And David, you're welcome to join this, obviously. But I probably need to set up a call directly with the BRE team and have you kind of walk through these issues and trying to come up with a resolution that will work for them. So
are they kind of at a work stoppage right now? I mean, as far as
yeah, I told them yesterday to hold until we have this conversation.
okay,
Just last night that they reached out to me.
okay,
But I was on the planning board for quite a while, and in a lot of cases, we had people coming in and carving off a separate lot that they could sell from their existing property, or they had an adjacent lot and they wanted to open that up for sale. So there are a lot of property holdings that do not have residences on them. And
yeah, the question is if they will,
buildable.
as you design, do you want to stub fiber in front of them so that in the future when a home is built, then you have that connection for that home. That's typically how BRE works, is they will run a fiber to that location, whether there's a home on there or not, because ultimately, eventually they figure there will be a home or potential home on there. So Keith, I'll tell you what,
you guys deal with that.
send me your openings tomorrow, and let me get John Owen on the phone with us, the three of us, and just kind of walk through this, and he can tell us what they're seeing, and we can, kind of describe these unique things about Westport to them and try to come up with a solution.
All right. I know I have meetings and and it's kind of late, but probably about 2. I don't know if he's be available at 2. I might have something between 12 and 1 also. So.
Okay, but you think after 2 o'clock your time, at 2 o'clock your time, you're golden?
Yeah.
Okay, let me see if I can set that up.
Okay.
I'll let you know. Okay. So Jeff, the other thing, I can review the strategic consideration survey. Do we want to wait until we have a full quorum for that?
Probably. Just you've got 4 responses so far, right?
We do.
Okay. Yeah, I'd say we probably want to wait.
Okay.
All right. So to kind of recap on the timeline, we need the BRE data to do the financial modeling. So that's why it's important what Devin's working through, because once that's done, we can go into the financial modeling and start to bring all the threads together to get a draft of the report put together.
Okay.
We will, as we do that, the strategic questions will be important because we'll want to have a section on strategic priorities, and we're going to want, the input of all the committee members for that.
Okay.
Who do you know who you have reports from, or responses from?
You have names, Devin?
No, it didn't ask for names. I mean, I obviously submitted mine. David, you probably did.
I think I did.
Yeah.
And so at least the 3 of you plus 1 more.
Well, Dave, if you want to go take it again, we won't know.
Well, send out reminders.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah.
All right. The thing we wanted to go through, I'm going to share my screen. And I know David, my sense is that both Renee and David have background in financial matters. I think Renee potentially specific to this world. Did you teach finance, David, or you just lived in that world?
I taught it. Yes,
Did you?
I
Okay.
did.
Well, you might be more helpful than we are, but here we go.
For about 40 years.
Okay.
And the last 30 of them at Harvard. So
Okay. That's awesome. Oh, that's gonna help more than anything. So that's great.
okay.
Can you see my screen?
But I see I see our pictures. Oh,
There
okay.
it is. There it is. Okay.
All right. So, this is the general presentation we use when we're talking about, let's step back. The first question a city or town's going to ask is, why should the town do this? Right. And you've been asking that question. We've got like an incumbent cable company. We've got an incumbent, historical telephone company. Why should the town do this? So that's one of the two most important questions. The next one is, okay, if we do it, how are we going to pay for it? And what does that all look like? And so this deck is really meant to not finalize that conversation, but to walk that conversation forward. The first couple of things we have already talked about, but they're important as we think about potentially financing a network. There are key issues. And the first one is we want to unbundle the problem. And so what we mean, when people get their charter bill, charter they give them a line item for taxes. They may give them a line item for TV and a line item for internet, but they don't break down the internet. And we feel like to really optimize the cost, then we need to isolate the core, the main buckets that roll into the cost. One of those is infrastructure. The other one is ongoing maintenance and operation of the network. And then the third is the services, the ISP services as it relates to internet access. So we think it's really important to unbundle this because there are three different problems and there are three different opportunities. So, we don't have to say a lot more other than when you unbundle them. So for example, in the infrastructure, if you're going to go after grants, you can if you get a grant, you can roll that into the infrastructure bucket and reduce the overall cost. It doesn't naturally have an impact on maintenance and operations, and it certainly doesn't have an impact on, or it may not have an impact on ISP services. So takeaway here is let's unbundle the costs so that we can unbundle them. Another one on infrastructure. We would want the town, to treat this as a utility operation because it's natural in a utility that when you pay off the infrastructure, that cost goes away. And that's preferred. And that's a way, once the infrastructure is paid off, then you can model to get the cost down to $30 a month for symmetrical gig.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Jeff, you may want to run slideshow mode so this is a little bigger. It's kind of small in the way it's displaying on the screen.
Okay.
So Jeff,
Go ahead. Sorry.
so to that model and to the costing and everything, one of the financial concerns that'll be brought up by our finance committee and residents is from a cable TV perspective, there's fees that the individuals pay that then ultimately get back to the town, right?
Through the franchise agreement.
So through the franchise agreement. So if we were to do something, people would be concerned that we'd be losing some of that money. So we would have to somehow duplicate that or replicate that fortunately or unfortunately, so that way we could show, that we're not impacting something else.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
actually,
so, go ahead.
that's actually a big concern for the cable access channels, right? They receive funding from Charter to operate and to pay their staff to produce all the meetings, the town meetings, and air them on Charter. So they receive a few $100,000, and then they get a capital grant, I guess, every few years as well. And that's actually what we're working on the cable committee, is this renegotiation that's happening in April. So those are funds, obviously, that are of concern to the people that are producing the programming for the town.
Sure.
Heck.
Yep. So,
Could I just jump in here?
of course.
One of the important things about the infrastructure expense is that will be borne largely by the subscribers and will not be funded with town debt. And one of the big issues in town these days, we've financed a police station, a fire station, and a big school addition. And I'm trying to distinguish those kinds of public services which can't charge users fees from the water and sewer works and the fiber optic cable system, where the users can pay for the costs of the infrastructure over time. That there will be a borrowing arrangement, a debt arrangement that will have to be paid off, and that's up in your monthly infrastructure expense. But think about adding another category here of a replacement for the town services that are provided. So you have a fourth category. In addition to monthly maintenance and operation, you have a monthly contribution to cable services, internet services by the various town offices and town entities. And include that in there. I don't think the cost of that's going to be very much, but there is this notion from the way in which it's done now. Oh my God, who's going to pay for our people who video all of our town meetings? And I think we need to provide for that specifically in this program.
Yeah. Yeah, all good comments. So, if you deploy townwide fiber optics, from a legal point of view, that has no bearing on your franchise agreement. But we all know from a practical point of view that if people have symmetrical gig now and a very reliable connection and no data caps, then they can go out to the market and they can get over the top. So, that franchise fee, what it does is anybody subscribing to cable TV, a portion of that's coming back to the town through the franchise agreement.
Yeah.
If you deploy fiber, it's not necessarily going to erode that, but in practicality, it probably will. So over time, people are going to find it's less expensive to stream content over the top than to access it through Spectrum. And so over time, but that's dying anyway. I mean, people are leaving.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you guys are relying on cable franchise fees, you better start transitioning that requirement or that necessity now, because 5 years from now, it's going to be a very small number.
Yeah, it's
going to be virtually non-existent.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is we should include that as one of our elements of the core business model.
Agreed. And we can build into the monthly maintenance and operation fees all kinds of operational type,
just make that specific, because people are going to say, who's going to pay for that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you right now, in the cities working with, where the majority of the cities are 30 and younger, none of them have cable TV. Zero.
I agree.
The only
Yeah.
ones that have cable TV are the 50s and older. And so, and that's without any kind of connectivity through the city, right? That's without any kind of fiber. So the franchise fee thing is going away slowly anyway. So it would be a good strategy as you're negotiating this to put together a strategy long term that weans you away from that. And yeah, if you want to build something in the monthly maintenance and operation of the fiber network to cover those costs, then great, do it.
Yeah,
Like
Renee,
David said, I think it'd be a small amount.
Yeah, I agree with David on this. And, we see on the cable side, the subscriber numbers are going down every year. And, my son lives in Westport. He doesn't have cable. I mean, he has internet, that's it. And he streams everything. So, yeah, you're right. Young people are certainly going away from it. And, that's going to be a reality.
All right.
Well,
I do think, though, that funding the production of programming is important, though, for
Sure.
the town. Coverage of the meetings,
Sure.
and actually taking advantage of the new fiber network and all the locations that we're able to actually produce programming from, down at the harbor, at the point. I mean, there are a number of different schools. I mean, I think it's still in the town's best interest to maintain that staff.
All right, Jeff, sorry, I steered you off course, so let me get you back.
No,
on-
no,
on
no,
track.
that's what we want. We
I
want-
want to add one more thing. I think if the cable subscribers are going down, why these various town activities that they're now funding are going to be diminished, their sources of funding. And I think this will be a great selling point if we can say in this program that we want to support those activities and we're going to provide for them. So I think we can turn that into a very positive thing.
Right.
Yeah, this is all the kind of feedback we want, because we want the report not to just be generic. We want it to be relevant locally. So this is exactly the kind of input we want.
Okay.
So anyway, I think you have also reinforced the value of unbundling these costs so that we can create a way to allocate money for these local needs. So, it makes the point.
Unbundle them a little more.
Okay, that's good. Thanks, David. We've already talked about take rate. We've had discussions on it. This table, there's too many numbers on this slide, but the point here is the point we've already talked about, which is there are common costs and there are what we call the drop, which is a cost that's specific to a premise. Now, your drop costs are interesting, or going to be interesting, because people have different length driveways. Some people have a quarter of a mile and some people have 40 feet. But the common costs are the costs that are shared across, let's say, the entire town. And so that's, the big portion of the network is going to be common. If you get a 50% take rate, then you're spreading those common costs across 50% of the population or the premises. If you get a 75% take rate, you're spreading those costs across 75. So you understand the relationship. Take rate matters because there is a point, as you think about getting down below a 30% take rate, then you're impacting the total cost per premise in such a way that it becomes less attractive to people. And so, the point here is take rate really matters. We say that feasibility, part of this project is feasibility analysis. We say feasibility is a function of take rate, and take rate is a function of value and communicating the value. So if we can create value, effectively communicate the value, it's going to have the impact we want on take rate. In turn, it will make the project feasible. So we just have to keep that. That's a variable we won't know until, I mean, you don't know it up front, you know it after the fact. But we do want, if the town goes forward in the process, you know, before you start spending a lot of money on construction, we're going to want a community engagement method to make sure that we've got a sustainable take rate to go forward.
Can I add a point there?
Yep.
That most of the owners of properties with long driveways don't give a damn about what it costs.
Okay.
And most of the properties that are very close to the sources do think about that, and they won't have much cost. So that I think the concern about distance of houses from the fiber optic system will not be a significant consideration for, I don't think it'll factor in very significantly.
Okay. And that should impact, so let's assume you go forward, you know, you're going to have to, as a committee, you're going to have to think through that from a policy point of view. I know that there's a town out in Western Mass that had a similar situation, and they did factor into the cost structure where the town, they shared those costs to some degree, but also some of the people with the longer driveways paid more because they were chewing up more infrastructure. So that's really a decision the committee would make, and you know, we can model it or help model it for you, but that's part of the value of local infrastructure is you get a set policy like that.
So Jeff, is there a way of projecting the take rate within plus or minus some percent or amount?
Yeah, I mean, you can't do it accurately till you actually do community engagement. So, you know, one way to do it is to say the town will go forward with the project once we pass, let's say, once we pass 40%. And at 40%, these are the projected costs per month and total. And if we can pass 50%, these are the projected costs. So if you want to see this go forward, here's the website. This is not legally binding, but go sign up, show your interest. And then if we get to a 45% number, then it's going to give the municipal light board and the select board the confidence they need to go forward. So there's different ways to do it. Some places will create a competition and say the first neighborhood that crosses this threshold will be the neighborhood we build first. And so there's different mechanisms, but we don't want to just say, you know, if we build it, they will come. We're going to want to do community engagement and get real data on what is the likely initial take rate.
Okay.
A question on that. Can we do this kind of sequentially, starting in perhaps the most favorable districts or the ones we're already putting in these two loops?
Yeah, we can do it townwide or how, you know, we want to proceed in the way that will lead to success. So yes, you can do it. You can do townwide, or you can start in a neighborhood where you know you're going to have a high take rate to provide the rest of the town an example of what it would look like. Either one of those.
David, we'll model the entire town as far as the financial, you know, pro formas and so forth. But from a deployment perspective, it's very common then from a practicality perspective to kind of break up the town in certain zones.
Yep.
And that's what Jeff's talking about. And then deploy where it makes sense, where the take rate's high, where, like you said, it's very, very favorable. And then that success kind of breeds more success, right? As people see what it is, they can look at it, they can feel it, it's real. Then they say, okay, now that I understand, I really want this in my neighborhood. So,
you know, we've got grant funding to do these two loops in the most densely populated part of town, and where there are a number of businesses also. And so it seems to me one of the strategies might be to move ahead with that and set up a municipal light company to be able to manage that. And if that really proves very successful, then we get a strong case for moving on to the rest of the town.
Agreed. In fact, in a lot of the towns and cities we're working with in Mass, they're kind of choosing an initial. Sometimes some of them are calling it pilot projects. Some's calling it the initial phase, right? But the concept is just what you described. Let's build out a section, a neighborhood, and with some businesses. Let's deploy it there, see how it goes, and then from there, then strategize to build further. So yeah, that's a really, really good strategy because again, you're actually proving success before you take on a level of risk that it represents the whole town.
Well, we can label this the Keith Novo Outreach Program.
There you go.
All right, let's go through the slides. Let's get through the slides because we're burning through some time here. So
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So construction financing, most of these projects will start with construction financing, just like building a home. So there's going to be some, it could be for a phase one, it could be construction financing for the whole town. The reason to do construction financing is really on the next slide, and we'll share these slides with you, is you want to de-risk the project. So, you'll know that, this, but there are certain variables that increase the risk for financing. There's construction risk, there's project management risk, supply chain risk, take rate risk, various operational risks. If you build it and you've got the take rate and you've stood up the operation and it's functioning, then is the time to go get long-term financing terms. And so we think about it just like building a home, whether it's a phase one or a town-wide, is we think you can get attractive. The town may have reserves, and some towns and cities will make themselves a loan at a better interest rate than they're getting from the bank. Others will go get a short-term loan to do the construction. Some are using ARPA funds, so there's a variety of ways to tackle this. But, it's just in terms of process, financial process, you're going to want short-term financing or construction financing to de-risk the project and then convert over to long-term financing. So, any questions on that or comments?
It makes me a little bit uncomfortable, but can you send me some examples of that, how you've done that?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we can, David. And we're telling you our experience. If you've taught finance for 30, 40 years, we're going to be happy to learn and listen. So,
Well, I just, right now we're in this very complicated period where interest rates are going up, especially 10-year rates and so forth. And, but this would still be municipal financing, wouldn't it, if it's a municipal entity?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it gets the tax advantage of muni financing.
Yep. And good terms too, probably. So,
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
and also, again, you kind of built your network right now using grants. So you'd want to explore those as possible ways of financing the short-term construction debt as well. So there's going to be lots of options and opportunities here. So, we're talking high-level generalities at this point.
Okay. All right. I'll pull back.
oh, you're good. All right. So, David, you tell us if you disagree with this, but we think there's three potential tools in the toolbox, general tools. One is a general obligation bond, which I'll talk a little more about and about. The other is a revenue bond. And the third is a property improvement assessment. So those are the three main categories in the way we think about it. And general obligation bonds, as you know, they're efficient and the lenders like them because it would bring the full faith and credit of the town, but they're politically difficult because they don't protect the general fund. And if the take rate suffers, then there's a spillover effect to the taxpayers. So we view general obligation bonds as potentially problematic from a political point of view.
right now, general obligation bonds for Westport are an impossible
Yeah. So yeah,
position.
we try to say it politely, but that's usually the case.
Okay, just right, scratch that.
Yeah. It's out there, but not
Okay,
tenable.
all right.
Revenue bond, the challenge here is for it to work, you've got to have a track record of performance. We particularly like revenue bonds. They can be a more straightforward tool, but we particularly like them when they're opt-in. So you're not forcing people to participate. So there's a voluntary component to them. But you do have to create a track record of performance to really get into the revenue bond, which again, the construction financing could demonstrate that capability. So if you can come in and show that you can build, so let's just say there's a phase one, we're going to do 500 homes, and we're going to do it with short-term finance. We're going to build it, design it, build it, stand up the operation, demonstrate a revenue stream from the infrastructure, and then do a revenue bond. Then you've shown that you've got a track record of performance. So it can work, and I think it is one of the tools in the toolbox, but we particularly like them when it's voluntary or opt-in. So questions, comments on that? Make sense?
That sounds much more reasonable to me.
Yep.
I
Okay.
agree.
All right, and then the other is a property improvement assessment. These vary by state. So, Massachusetts is going to have a different statute than Kentucky on this, and a different model. Sometimes these are overly complicated. So in California, these are difficult, just because the way the statute is written. I'll show you the statute in Idaho, and we would want to dig into it if this is appealing to you. In Idaho, it's under an LID, and the statute says the holder of any bond issued under the authority of this code shall have no claim, therefore, against the municipality by which the same is issued. So the nice thing about it is the city, in Idaho's case, stands up the utility. They operate the utility, they oversee it, they control it, but there really is no financial recourse for any kind of defaults back to the city because of the LID statute. So, that's Idaho. That's an example, but beyond that, it's not really relevant for Massachusetts. But I think the point of this is that, perhaps the enterprise fund is more relevant for Massachusetts. And we told you there's a debate with various cities about municipal light plant versus enterprise fund. We prepared a memo on this for the town of Revere, and I'll send it out to the committee in Westport just so you can see it. But, I think that's the enterprise fund is potentially on the table for you. You're really going to need to guide us. And at the end of the day, David, we're grateful you're here because you're going to be able to steer all of us in the right direction.
Well, I'll try, but
Yeah.
we've got various enterprise funds here. I think I'll look at what you've got to say. My inclination now is to go for the municipal light company, and which would that have an enterprise fund? Is that
as I've researched it in Massachusetts, they're putting them side by side as either or, but I don't know that they necessarily are mutually exclusive. So, but I think that's a legal question we're going to want to run to ground. If you do, the question is, if the governance model is municipal light plant, then what is the financial structure that's appropriate under that governance model? And we're going to want legal advisors to weigh in on that. That's not Entry Point's expertise.
okay? Do you have any contacts with Taunton? They've got the municipal light company that's involved in all this. They should know pretty well about how this works and what
Yeah.
they thought about it.
Yeah. I think we're going to want, so they're going to know their situation. I think we're going to either want to talk to KP Law or Lock Lords in Boston. They could also weigh in it, but I think we are going to want to get some legal advice, spend a little bit of money and get legal advice on the right structure, both for bonding and for governance. And so anyway, I think
Well,
we're not attorneys, so we don't want to.
I
pretend-
wouldn't push too hard on the attorneys to give us financial advice, legal
No.
advice of the alternatives. But anyway, I think these are going to be tricky questions. But anything you can send me to help me understand it, I'll be happy to study and try to get back to the whole group.
Okay, excellent. All right, and the point of this all is, these are the tools in the toolbox. What is it that makes sense for Westport? And we know GO bonds are off the table, and so we've got these remaining tools left to us to look at.
Okay, good.
All right. All this slide's showing, I don't think this is on the table for Westport either. This is just showing that if you treat it as a real utility and you built the fiber to the curb of every premise, that would result in the lowest cost for everybody because you're spreading the common costs across the whole population. I don't think that's on the table. I think what's on the table is an opt-in or voluntary model where we're not going to force people to participate.
Right.
So anyway, that's the main point of this slide is that's the way to get to drive the lowest cost. All right. And this last category, I don't think you have this available to you. However, I do think the state of Massachusetts is making positive moves. California has set up a loan loss reserve fund for municipal broadband projects. So with the loan loss reserve fund, the way we think about it is you're basically getting your mom and dad to sign on your first car or your first mortgage. So the state would come in and backstop to a degree the project to make it more attractive for financing. And so California is explicitly doing this for municipal projects. Massachusetts hasn't yet, but I do know that states are watching what's going on in California, for example. So I just put it out there as another financing thing that's going on out in the world, but it hasn't arrived in Massachusetts yet for this specific application.
Can you send me information on that example?
Yes.
Because our local senator is the chair of the Joint Committee on Ways and Means in the state government, and he has a great deal of influence. He's just been steering through a very successful budget that has to be completed by the end of this month. So I think it's something I can refer to his staff and ask them to comment on it, and they will feedback.
Okay. Yes, I can send you information on that. And essentially by getting the state to provide it's like a 10% backstop is what it is. So if the state would step in, they set aside reserves and up to 10% of any loss, the state will fill that space. And so it helps you to get better interest rate, better, term, that kind of stuff.
All right, just send me the stuff and I'll look at it.
Okay. All right. So that's the main stuff we wanted to cover. And so, you can see the decision making as we go forward is, are we doing a municipal light plant? Are we recommending a municipal light plant or a enterprise fund? And then if so, is it a revenue bond that goes with it? Or are we going to look at some kind of special assessment, property assessment? So we're not trying to answer questions here. We're just trying to help you think about the problems we've got to solve on the financial side.
Okay.
Okay.
And you'll send the recording of this around to all of us and to the other members of the committee.
So Keith, I think that'll be on you, correct? And then we'll get the deck out to everybody.
Keith, is that okay?
Keith's on mute. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yep, I'll get that out.
All right.
Well,
So that's
we're almost
yeah, we're getting there.
almost the witching hour.
Yep, we are almost at the witching hour. And we're getting, once we get the BRE data, we're going to go into financial modeling, which means we're moving towards getting a draft report pulled together. So, I think we're on 2 weeks from today, correct? Not next week. Is that right, Keith?
I
That's
think
what
we're
I wanted-
scheduled to be back on next week. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we want to bring up. We're kind of off the schedule this week. The question is, do we want to redo the schedule to where it's every other week from today or from next week?
What do you need to get done on time?
I don't think, from our perspective, the main thing we need is the BRE data. So I don't think we don't need the committee to meet next week from our side. We're waiting for this data. And so our real need going forward is we want to get the bones of the report put together and then come back to you with any unanswered questions so that we can fill in any gaps.
All right. Excuse me.
Sounds good.
Yeah, in fact, Keith, as I look at my calendar, next week is the last meeting we have on the calendar. I guess it kind of ended the end of July. So we'll need to kind of reestablish a schedule in August anyway. So if you want to look at that, maybe talk to Sean and figure out how you want. I personally am gone the 4th of August, but Jeff will be available.
So your recommendation is right now to push next week's out a following week. So we're 2 weeks from today.
Yep.
And then at that time we can reassess. Do we get back on original schedule or keep that schedule? So.
Yep.
So, okay.
And then I will coordinate directly with you, Keith, as soon as I hear back from the BRE guys.
Yeah, and I'm gonna gauge with the town administrator. He used to be our town planner, so he might have some additional knowledge on like those shape files and everything. See if we can get that. Like I said, it is on the town website, and you can select individual ones, so that data exists somewhere. We just gotta see how we can get a copy of it. So let me see if I can work that a little bit more.
I'd like to hear from Renee whether there's anything happening in the Cable Advisory Committee that we need to be aware of to respond to.
So really there, a couple things came up in the last committee meeting. The concern of the initial fiber build that's going on in the town and whether or not there will be specific locations for the cable access people to tap into. That's one concern. So in other words, at town hall and then the annex where they film a lot of the meetings, whether or not the plan is to install fiber optic drops at those locations as well as the school for the to be able to go live from those locations. So that's one concern that the cable advisory committee has. And then obviously, as I mentioned before, the concern about subscribership numbers dropping. Obviously this fiber build, taking off, and then fiber to the home taking off, and potentially losing the funding for the staff there. So those are the two main points that we're talking about now, and we're actually gearing to come up with a presentation to the select board for recommendations to bring to Spectrum in terms of our asks. We're looking at some additional capital money to offset the loss of subscribers and some additional operating funds as well. Because as subscribers drop in Westport, obviously the fees and the revenues that come back to the town are dropping as well. So we're trying to offset that. And I think the Cable Advisory Committee is aware of, and they see the future, right? They know exactly what we've been talking about here in terms of, cable TV disappearing. I think the concern is okay, well, it's going to go away. What is it going to morph into? How is this transition to fiber to the home really going to take shape? And really, what will it yield in terms of, productions for and programming for the town? Those are the major concerns that the Cable Committee have right now. And I know, David, you've had some sidebar conversations with Irene Buck. She's a great chairperson and is trying to do her due diligence in terms of, providing what's best for the town. And I think we all see the writing on the wall. We just want to make sure that things don't get lost in the shuffle here. I think that's our main concern.
Well, I agree with that completely. I encourage you to talk with Keith about your first topic, because he's in the best position to inform you and help you with that. But I think
I was planning on reaching out to you, Keith.
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of get through some of this stuff first, but as they're doing the install, yeah, I'd like to talk to you about that.
All right. So just at a high level, Renee, the fiber is just replacing the existing, charter infrastructure that we have in place. It's really the internal network switches and the internal network to the buildings that provide the, that cable TV access that you're talking about. So from the perspective of we're disconnecting from one fiber and plugging into another fiber, everything within the buildings should be staying the same. So if there's, community access at the annex or the town hall, those are still going to exist. So that's not changing or going away.
Great. I can bring that back to the committee in August then.
Okay.
great. Okay.
All right, gentlemen, nice to spend some time with you. Hopefully this has been valuable.
Yep. No, it has been. So if I just one comment, I know that you had said, this issue with BREs came up yesterday, but if issues do come up, obviously within the week, that you think I can help address, let me know so we don't wait that week or 2 week period to find out there's a problem. I can start working on it, and hopefully, either at the next meeting or before then, I can help get an answer or something. Okay. So
yeah, for sure. I would have pinged you immediately, but I knew we had this call coming up. So
yep. Okay. No, just want to, so that way, I just want to keep everything moving forward, and, stop anything from any delays that we may incur in our schedule. So,
Yeah.
All right.
Very good.
So I don't have anything else. Is everyone else okay? Or are we good?
Yep, motion to adjourn, I guess, if you need one. We'll
Yeah,
see you in
it's
2 weeks.
unofficial, but I concur.